Good day, and welcome to another day of maximizing your singleness. It's a beautiful opportunity, I think, for all of us to kind of reflect, look back, but also look ahead and see how we can position ourselves, so we can grow, and so we can be great contributors, not just to ourselves, but to those around us, right? So, how are you doing today, Angie? It's always good to see you.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing
I'm
great.
good.
Every day that I have an opportunity to breathe is a great day
That's
for
true.
me.
That's
So
true. I agree.
I'm feeling good. I really like the topic that you suggested for today because
Okay.
I think that there are so many individuals that are single that find themselves in this situation.
Yep.
Whether you be a male or female, having gone through a relationship and now being single always poses some special circumstances.
It does.
And primarily because there's a reason why you're single, right? I mean, if you were dating
True.
or if you were married to somebody, you're not single because the relationship was going great.
No, not at all.
The reason why you're now single is because there were some hiccups.
Most
There were some
definitely.
problems. And what I find is oftentimes, when people break up, they don't always break up on the best of terms.
True.
Some
Right.
people do, but oftentimes there can be some animosity, right? There can be some hurt feelings.
True.
There can be some pain. And then there's also the chance that the person that you are no longer with, that their personality was such that it didn't work, right?
True.
But
Yes.
also it can be because now that they can be somewhat resentful, of where you are, what you have accomplished, and all those kind of things.
Yep.
So that's why I think today is so important because it gives us an opportunity to say, well, how do you move forward when the person that you have a connection to because you have children together, how do you move forward when that person is not trying to move forward, but actually doing all they can do to make you miserable? And I'm not saying they do it purposefully, but their actions and attitudes create that situation. I mean, am I saying it in the right context?
Yes, you are. And, this is a tough one for me because I will say I've been divorced maybe 17 years and I don't feel like there has been any growth whatsoever in the relationship. And that's pretty sad, especially when you have children and now they're adults and they're witnessing certain things. So for me, it's a process. It's a day by day process. So what I have grown to recognize as I have grown in Christ is I hear you say this all the time, that you have to know that the enemy is always busy for the most part, and it's not the person per se, but the enemy, just the words that they're using, I would say, to disrespect and to, even when you think things are okay, you go along for a while, things are okay. It's almost like in your mind, you're expecting at some point, things have been peaceful for too long. Something is going to happen.
Right, yeah. But the irony of it is, you should be able to expect peace.
I agree.
You should be
That's
able.
right.
But unfortunately, like you said, the devil doesn't stop working.
He does not.
He and his employees, they don't mind working overtime.
Oh, most definitely.
And they don't mind working holidays. So then the question is, how do we deal with that? What do we do? And I think that there are three areas that you have brought about that I think just deserve some special attention.
Okay.
And you talked about, or you brought to my attention that in order to not fall into the trap of allowing that person to control you, because it's easy to do.
Yes, it is.
You will be reacting to the
Most
person
definitely.
rather than moving forward with your own agenda. And so there are three things you talked about. One, you said, is that you have to know that the enemy is always busy. That's step number one.
Yes.
You cannot expect the devil to take a break, right?
Exactly.
And you have to know that he will use whatever mechanism that he can to get under your skin.
Yes, he
because
will.
the devil knows what will cause you to react the quickest.
He sure does.
The second thing you indicated is that we have to be able to recognize God's truth and not our own truth. Because if you don't, you can kind of get mixed up in the middle of things, right? And the last thing you said was we have to be able to give that anger and disappointment to God. So we want to talk about those three things, right?
Okay.
And so, so the first thing I would want you to help those who are watching to understand is when we talk about know that the enemy is always busy, if that's the case, if we know the enemy is going to stay busy and going to always be disruptive, then what can we do? What can this single mother do that has a baby's daddy that doesn't want to be a father but just want to be the baby daddy? How can we help that gentleman, that young man who's trying to move forward, but that ex is so jealous that he is moving forward that she wants to keep causing problems? Give them some advice on how to deal with that individual that never seems to sleep.
Just never seems to stop. And there are some men that actually deal with this as well. They have babies' mamas, I should say, that deal with that drama. But I will say you have to know who you are in God and who God is in you. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is easy, that, it's like, okay, well, this person called me out of my name. Well, it's okay. That's not what I'm saying, because disrespect is disrespect. And even though the enemy is always busy, that person still, they're making a choice to be disrespectful to you. And this is a person that should care about you the most and want to see you grow and get further in life. But for whatever reason, because of their shortcomings, they can't. So when they are being disrespectful, it took me years to get to this point. But now, knowing who I am in God and God showing me who I am, not the disrespectful names, but I am his child, and knowing that he loves me and he created me. I'm here for his purpose. This individual does not validate me. So everyone needs to know regardless of what they're saying, they don't validate you. And some people will get angry, and try to manipulate you. They get upset when you don't follow the program or do what they want you to do, or even when they have other things going on in their lives and they're angry, they use you as a verbal punching bag, so to speak, if you allow it. And that can be difficult. It's not easy to just turn the other cheek, as you would say, and just move forward. But I will say you have to find your peace in the storm. You have to stay centered in God all the time, because if you don't, once again, the enemy is always busy, and he will use that one that should be the closest to you, that should be working with you to tear you down. And there's a reason the enemy wants to tear us down. Right. So we have to know exactly what's going on, that, this person is making a choice to be disrespectful to me. At the same time, you keep your distance from them, but just knowing who you are in God and who God is in you, and just keep moving, just move forward with it,
And one thing I have, just again, to just kind of highlight what you're saying.
Okay.
That I was listening to a conversation, and I'll say this.
Okay.
I wasn't eavesdropping.
Okay.
But my office happens to be right behind the kitchen.
Oh, okay.
So those of you who are in the kitchen, who are always talking, know this: if I'm in my office, it's almost like you're in the office with me. Okay. That's what people talk about.
Okay.
And one of the young ladies in there was saying, and I'm not quoting her, but she said this. And he had the nerve to call me the B word. And she said the B word. He had the nerve to call me the B word. And I lost it, she said. And because nobody's going to call me that word and get away with it, And she said that once that happens, then he threw the other thing at her, and you call yourself a Christian.
Of course. Of course.
And so
that's it.
What I hear you saying then is that we have to remember what our mothers taught us, which is sticks and stones may break my bones, right? But words will never hurt us.
That's right.
So I guess what I hear you saying is that we got to keep that in our head at all times and know that what a person calls you, if that's not who you are, why are you upset about it?
Or even if you are, be a good one. You know,
That's right.
that's
Yeah,
how I
right,
look at it.
Right, if they are, right.
Yeah.
Because if you are what they call you, then why are you upset about it?
Or my thing is this, in that conversation you heard, my ex-husband, he does the same thing. And this is how I look at it. Some people are intellectually and emotionally stunted.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know anything else. They don't know how to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, the way they come at you with what they know, this is how they express their anger, and they only know how to be disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to recognize the person that you're dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to just let it roll off. Now, years ago, this would bother me some kind of terrible, because I couldn't understand, how is it that a person that is supposed to love me can call me out of my name in that way?
Right.
Well, I had a name for him as well here recently. That's not right, you know.
Right.
But that doesn't stop me. I still love him, you know, as my kid's father. But you know, we just don't mix, as you can see. Sometimes, you know, two people just bring out the worst in one another for whatever reasons. But at the same time, when you know who you are in God, and recognize that's what they want to do. They want to take you outside of yourself. So the first thing they will say is, and you call yourself a Christian. That's the enemy. He's trying his best. He's trying his best to get you to step out of line.
Right, and make you feel bad about who you are.
Yeah. Once you cuss and go off.
Right. Yeah. And even if you do happen to cuss and go off, that doesn't stop you from being a child of God.
That's right. It's still okay.
You're still a child of God. And so what we have to do, I would say then, in those circumstances, is once someone says, especially if they say, and you call yourself a child of God, that should be a trigger to say, you know what, let me lower the temperature.
Exactly.
Let me show them that I truly am a child of God.
Yep.
Now, it doesn't mean you take abuse. Now, let me say that.
Yes.
It doesn't mean one has to take abuse, you know, because certainly if someone is being harmful and physically abusive, you never want to put up with that.
No.
You never put up with that.
No.
But you cannot let another person control your mind. And that's my thing.
Yes.
And so that's why I thought it was so important, because if a person does use verbal, most of the time when people are using verbal insults, it's because they're trying to control you and get you off your game.
Oh, most definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you don't stay in control, they will have accomplished what they tried to accomplish, right? So, I would say, like you say, you have to know who the true enemy is, because I like to look at myself as being the most intelligent person I know.
Of course.
I could be wrong, but I could think of myself that way. So that means to me, if someone else can get me off my game, it's because it's not them talking. It's the devil telling them what to say.
Okay.
Because the person ain't intelligent enough to get me off my game. That's how I like to interpret it, right? But the devil is smart enough to get me off my game, because he's been around so long. So anytime I find myself with someone's words getting under my skin, that is my trigger to say, you know what? That's not them.
That's the enemy.
That's the enemy influencing them.
I like that.
Because the enemy knows just what will cause me to lose my temper.
He does.
Because he's been around a long time. He's caused my mother to lose her temper. He's caused my father to lose his temper. And he's caused their parents to lose their temper.
That's right.
He knows the whole DNA structure
He sure does.
of what would cause us to be that way.
He sure does.
So let's say we've gotten it under control then. Let's say we've got it under control. We've got to the point where now we know and we recognize that it's the enemy being busy, right? But then we have that next issue that we have to kind of focus on, which is, whose truth am I following here? Is it God's truth or is it my truth? And I say that because sometimes we can think it's our truth, and thinking it's our truth, we'll blame the other person.
Oh, yeah.
When really it's not them. It's just that our truth is all messed up.
Yes.
But if it's God's truth, then we can certainly put it in perspective, and we'll know then that, okay, I am doing what God would want me to do, and I'm not following what I think. So help us to kind of reconcile that. And how do we kind of determine, and how do we get to the point where, we know that we're stepping out in that regard, even though the other person in our head, we think they are letting the enemy influence them. how do we know that we're not doing the same thing? I guess that's the point I'm getting at. How do we know we're not doing the same thing they're doing and know that we are functioning the way God wants us to function?
You have to take a step back. And I had to do this. I had to do some self-evaluation after I kind of lost myself for a second. And I prayed on it. And I asked God to show me what could I have done different, in this situation. So I think we should all start there. If you happen to go off, or even, if you don't, just ask yourself, what can I do different? Or basically it's about God's truth is being righteous. We can't worry about what's right or wrong per se, what we think is right or wrong. This person should have done that, or they should have done this. It shouldn't have happened that way. Regardless, sometimes you have to just do what's necessary, especially when it comes to children, and just move forward. Whatever it is they need, make sure the child has what they need and they're not in the middle of that drama. And just seek God for his truth, not your own, because there are always two sides to every story. We all know that. So regardless of this person's side, this side, instead of arguing back and forth, just do what's necessary. Just do what is righteous, not right or wrong, because we say that right or wrong, it's subjective. So,
and that's true, it is. And I think because a lot of times, like you say, there are two sides to every story, right? And so the ex, or that, that person, we call them the ex, right? In their hearts and minds, they may truly believe they're right.
Oh, definitely.
They may truly believe they're right. And that's why you're right. It's hard to say, well, who's the right or the wrong, because it's a matter of perspective.
It is.
And in their perspective, they're right.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why they're so vehement in taking the stance that they're taking. So the question, you're right, is not who's right or wrong. The question is who's righteous in this thing.
That's right.
And recognizing that my righteousness is not me, but God.
That's right.
So then the question that I have to reconcile, what I hear you saying is that I have to be able to rise above both our behaviors, right?
We do, yeah.
And I can't do that by myself.
No, we
So
cannot.
I have to rise above both our behaviors and say, again, it seems so simple, hard to do, it seems so simple, but answer the question, what would Jesus do?
That's it right there.
Right.
What would Jesus do?
What would
That's
Jesus
right.
do in this
That's
situation?
right, yeah.
And that should be the way I respond every time. What would Jesus do? And if I can truthfully answer that question, that puts me not on my agenda, but on God's agenda.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah.
He sees all. God sees everything, so he'll deal with it.
Right.
He will.
Well, and then too, I'm listening to what you said, and it kind of threw something else in my head. Spirit kind of took me somewhere else.
Okay.
Is that if I'm doing that, it allows me to focus not on anyone in the problem.
That's right. It
Right?
does. You're right.
Because then I don't focus on the ex. Then I don't even focus on if there are children involved. I don't focus on the children.
No.
Then I don't even focus on me.
No.
My only focus then is on behaving the way God would have me behave.
That's right.
And so
right.
rather than me looking outwardly at the other person's behavior, which is normally what we do, you behaving like a fool. That's what we normally do, right?
Yes.
You behaving like the devil. I don't look at their behavior anymore. I look at my own behavior and say, is my response godly? Not whether or not their response is filled with devilishment or evilness, but how is my response? That changes the whole dynamic, I believe.
It does. It really does. It just kind of, like you said, it puts things in perspective. And then at the end of the day, you're not condemning yourself or the enemy condemning you. So that is the best thing to do. And like you said, it's not easy. It's not easy at all, especially in the heat of the moment and things are going on and you're kind of fed up, so to speak, with things when you just keep dealing with the same thing time after time after time. But that is the only way to find your peace in the storm, is just to focus on God and do what he would want us to do, to be righteous in that way. So, yeah.
And again, we're not talking about excusing behavior, right?
No, or accepting that
right.
abuse.
We're not saying excusing behavior. We're not saying accept that, evil behavior. But what we are saying is make sure you focus on your own behavior. Because what's important is how you deal with the situation.
That's right.
and because you want to maintain control.
That's right.
And if you allow that other person to lead you places, that person says, you ain't nothing but a bee. And then you respond, well, you ain't nothing but a dog. Then they're leading your conversation.
True.
And if every time they say something, you respond, they're leading you. And to me, that's the worst position to be in.
It is. It's like, it just doesn't make sense to go back and forth, even though you might want to. It's right there. And I can honestly say, I've been there when I want to go back and forth. And even as of recently, when I had to pray and I knew the situation I was walking into, I said, Lord, help me. Before I step into this place to see my son, make sure I need you to help me to focus on you and doing what is right and righteous. Don't respond, because I already knew what I would be dealing with. And that's another thing. You have to know who you're dealing with also.
Yes.
You have to know who this person is. If they're constantly, if nothing has changed, same habits, same patterns, it's not going to change.
And we can't expect it to change.
No, we cannot.
Right.
We cannot.
And I think, and the thing that we have to take into account, again, because we're talking about exes, primarily, is that if there is a child involved, right, then that ex is going to be in your life forever.
Or even when they grow, they still 26 and 23, still dealing with drama.
Right, forever.
Yes.
Because the child is a product of two people.
That's right.
And so you have to figure out how to deal with the difficulty of an ex.
We do.
For not just, when the child is, in your arms or when the child's in elementary school, but for life. And the reason why I think that's so important is because oftentimes, especially in our culture and in our families, sometimes what we will do is we will ostracize the ex because of their behavior, thinking that, that's the best thing. But really, that's the worst thing.
It is.
Because now that child doesn't have the benefit of both families and both parents. And they need that. We all need to know where we come from.
That's right.
I don't care if the ex is doing 30 years, in Mecklenburg prison. They still need to know that, or they're in Goochland, they're in the women's prison, whatever.
Yeah.
That child still needs to know that, that's my parent. I love my parent. My parent may have done wrong by my mother or my father or someone else. It could have even been domestic violence that put the child's other parent in prison, right? But just because the parent did wrong to, one parent did wrong to the other parent, don't mean that the child should not know that that's their parent.
That's true.
And that's my take on it.
I agree.
Because they need to understand and they need to know where they're from, and still get the support.
I agree. Completely.
So then I guess if you can do that then, right, and we and I hear you say this oftentimes, is that you can't hold on to stuff, right? Because, I would imagine if someone is treating you bad, someone is calling you out of your name whenever they call you to talk about the child, whatever, it's always, like, a bee stinging every time they call.
Yeah.
And if you're not giving them a little bit back, if they're giving you the B word, but you ain't giving them nothing back, it's got to do two things. One, it's become a disappointment that this other person has not grown beyond their anger, right?
Yes.
But it's also got to be a hard thing to hold that anger in, because that can cause some severe stress, ulcer, and all that kind of stuff on you as well.
It does.
So what advice can you give to single parents, who have exes that are cantankerous? What advice can you give on how they can not hold on to anger, but either let it go or rechannel it somehow?
Well, I will say give it to God. That's really just about all you can do with it, and rechannel it into purpose like I'm doing right now. But giving it to God, your hurt, the pain, the disappointment, like you said, it's like, why are we still dealing with this so many years later? Giving it to God allows him to deal with it. He'll take it and do whatever he sees fit with the other person. But when you try to handle it yourself, now you said, okay, I got this, I'll take care of it. But really, God can take care of it in a way that we cannot.
Okay.
So that's why it's better to give it to him, even though sometimes we may go off a little bit first. We lose our cool, especially if it's about the children. It's really easy to just fly off the handle depending on the situation. And then I would also like to add, to tell others not to be too hard on yourself, even if you do have a moment, because after a while, that buildup, it's hard. It's kind of hard to deal with, Once again, like you said, it's disappointing. It's very disappointing. And then to know that the children may be witnessing this, and you don't want to speak ill of the other parent. The kids will eventually pick up. They'll see what's going on, and especially as adults. And I never thought that day would come, but it's unfortunate.
Yes.
But the day has come. Several days have come, and but I will say, just giving it to God, and then don't be too hard on yourself, and then be mindful of reaching for vices when you are hurting, when you're feeling that disrespect or that discomfort. The first thing you might want to do is reach out to whatever it is that comforts you, so to speak. Kind of, because even though we say it doesn't get to us, give it to God and let it roll off, the enemy knows what hurts. The enemy knows who we are and what we've dealt with, so he will use that person to get right, I don't want to say on that nerve, but to just keep pulling the scalp back on that wound that you have, or that scar, when you're trying to let it heal. So that's why it's best to stay in God. Just keep your peace as far as God is concerned, or God and you remain grounded and peaceful. And then also my dad, I was reliving it. That's another thing. When you relive it and you tell people, want to talk about it over and over again. I can't believe this person did this or said that. Basically, that reliving it, you're just making yourself angrier and angry. You just get angry all over again. And the stress isn't good for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would think too, what you said, it's got to be, I guess you have to be purposeful about not substituting the vice.
Very intentional. You have to recognize what you're doing.
Yeah.
You do.
For the void, because it's got to be, I think the natural tendency is, when you're disappointed, is to fall back on something that was pleasurable.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And as we oftentimes say, just because it feels good to you don't mean that it's good for you.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that's why you find people sometimes developing habits that are not good for them. Because they are, again, and it's because they're allowing another person to get in their head.
Yeah.
And so you may do things to get them out of your head, like, drinking it too heavily, or some other form of a chemical to kind of alleviate the pain or the disappointment.
Yeah.
And that all those steps are temporary.
They are.
And all those things will wear off.
Yep.
But once you develop the habit, it's hard to get rid of the habit.
It is. It is.
And sometimes I think people can even start to, I guess, change their own sense of who they are to accommodate that pain or that vice. Because if you're not careful, you'll start seeking validation where you shouldn't.
Yes.
You start finding things to make you feel better because another person has cut you so much.
Yep.
And then that can put you in a bad place as well.
Most definitely. It definitely can. Like, I had to think about that myself in the way that I felt. And I had to really sit down and I prayed and I asked God, I said, let's get to the bottom of this. Why does it hurt so much, as far as what the person has said or what they've done? And then at the same time, I had to realize the direction I wanted to go. It's almost like you have to reset your default. I've had to learn to do that over time. Like, God is our default. He created us. So we should always go back to Him to fill that void, or to help with that discomfort and the pain.
Mhm.
But over the years, I had a different default because it's something I programmed myself to reach for a relationship
Wow.
or a man, to feel
Yeah.
better. So if you don't recognize what you're doing, you'll fall back on your old default versus going to God.
Now that's deep.
Yeah.
You know what? Now that's deep. God is your default because He created you.
Yeah.
That's deep.
But it took me a while to get there.
Yeah, right. But you know what?
Yeah.
That is critical because you're right. It is so easy to. It's kind of like it's so easy to switch who should be the default.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me. If you're on your computer sometimes. It'll ask you for the,
That's it.
Who do you want to be the default browser?
Yeah.
And you've been using Google all this time, and something else will pop up.
Yeah.
And say, who do you want? Click on here for your default browser, right? And you click it, and before you know it, you're away from that which got you where you were.
Yes,
right?
if you don't pay attention,
and
it's easy.
And the same thing happens in life. Well, I'm going to preach on that one time, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the same thing happens not just to single people, but in a different context. It's that church people, God is their default.
Yes.
Right? God is their default. But if something happens, I know this is not on what we're talking about, but I just want to throw this out at you because this is such a deep comment. Church people who have been hurt, God is normally your default. But if you get hurt in the church, then you'll switch defaults. And they'll leave the church and they'll say, those people.
Yeah.
And now they will let the world become their default.
Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, I don't need to be in church anyway because them folk was talking about me on the usher board.
Yeah.
Or them folk was talking about me on the choir.
They say they got church hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
The people on the front row was talking about me because I didn't dress a certain way. So their default changes. And rather than letting God be their default for pain, now they go back and they'll go right back to the default they just left, which was the club or the bottle.
That's right.
Or the or whatever.
Yep.
That is such a critical point to make. And God knows it's true in this case that, we start out with God as our default. That's where we get our pleasure from. That's where we get everything that we need from. Then you'll meet somebody. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And all of a sudden you can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't do nothing. They become your default.
They do. They become the browser. Look.
Right. So you default to when you're in pain. You default to them for that pain. When you feel lonely, you contact them. Whatever you're going through, whatever issues, they become your default.
They do.
And then when something happens in that relationship, you feel empty.
You're lost. Don't know where to go. You forgot about God.
Right. Because the difference is the person will leave you.
They will.
But God won't. And He says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's right. So, and to me, that's the thing. I like what you're saying, because normally, I'm just trying to tie it back in without taking too much time. Okay. But normally, when we get angry, let's say, the way we release the anger is we'll call a friend.
Yes.
Right? You call a friend, and like you said, you keep going through that event to your friend. You're on the phone with a friend and you're telling them everything that happened so your friend can agree with you
That's it.
that you had a right to cuss that person back out.
Seeking that validation from them.
Seeking validation.
Yeah.
And so that friend becomes that default. But releasing anger to the friend exacerbates the situation.
It does.
Because now your anger starts to get more intense because they keep telling you why you are right to be angry.
Like you said, we nursing the drama, not the pain, but the drama.
Right. Yeah. Well, if you took it to God, then He's not going to keep giving you reasons to keep nursing the anger and keep nursing all that stuff.
He's not. He's
going to help you let it go.
That's right.
So you can move forward.
That's right. You are right. And I would like to add this once again. It's okay if you do kind of let loose a little bit. It's okay. Don't be too hard on yourself. I spoke to my dad about it, something that recently happened, and he said, all right, now preach it, woman. I'm like, really? You know, so he was teasing me, but at the same time, I knew what he was saying. You've come too far in your walk to allow this to get you off track. I got it, but at the same time, I took it as if he was saying, like, I'm not allowed to make a mistake. I'm still human. Regardless of my growth with Christ, I'm still human.
Right.
So it is okay. My mom said it's okay, so I'm gonna go with her. It's okay.
Well, and that's a key point, right? We just because we somehow allow the influence to, and I think that's why the second point you raised was so critical when you said, you know, own God's truth. Because if you don't own God's truth, you will continue down that path.
Yes.
Right? You know,
Yes.
that mistake will become your norm.
It will.
Rather than it being a mistake that you lashed out, it will become what you do each time.
Exactly.
Is lash
Learn
out.
from it, like you said.
But,
yes.
but if you let God, you know, truth, then yes, I let the enemy get in my head this time, but not next time. And you have to beat yourself up for it, you know, for what happened.
Yeah.
It won't happen next time. And actually, it becomes an opportunity rather than a negative, because that's opportunity to learn from it.
That's right.
Right. So the next time it happens, not just with this person, or with anyone else in your life, that you can use it as a growth mechanism and be better.
That's right. That's right. Recognize it. And then words of wisdom, I'm sure we're wrapping up here at this point, right? The enemy, once again, the enemy knows what hurts. And he's going to do or say whatever he can or use that person to get you off your game. So then you start to feel unworthy or like, I can't do what God has called me to do. But this is the thing. If God has called you, then he already knows the mistakes you're going to make. The mistakes you have made in the past, the mistakes you're going to make. So it's okay. So don't let the enemy get in your mind and make you think, I'm not worthy of what God has called me to do because I messed up. That's not true. God already knows, and he's already made, what's the word for it? He's already made, what's the word? I can't think of the right word. He's already laid it out. It's okay. Jesus already died for our sins. That's it. It's okay. It is okay.
He's paid the price for us.
That's it. That's it
and
right
he
there.
understands and he knows, and it is. It is. He's an advocate for us.
That's right.
So that we can move forward.
That's right.
Listen, I thought this was such an enriching conversation today.
I agree.
Such a beautiful topic because, you know, it's something that I believe all individuals, that if you have been in a relationship, you've experienced this. You've experienced where that person, because of the type of relationship, it's been problematic to move forward at one time or another. But we have some ammunition now. We have something that we can use to keep us going.
Right.
I just want to continue to say thank you all so much for letting us be a part of your day.
Yes.
And please continue to like us on Facebook and share with your friends so that everyone can grow, everyone can be better, and everyone can maximize where they are so that God can get the glory out of their lives. Have a beautiful day.